Hey everyone, I am TheChosenOneLegend here, as always joined by my co-host.
Hi, I'm Kai, also known as Fascurreyn.
And welcome back to BunchaJokahs, where, let's not sugarcoat it here, we are bloody hyped for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is coming out this year, announced just last week. Hot damn, that is crazy, isn't it?
Oh, it's insane. It's
yeah,
so cool. Yeah, like a big end to the direct, and it's brilliant. It's so good.
it really is. I mean, it's no secret how much we love Xenoblade here. You know, our podcast is named after Xenoblade 1. We met and started the podcast because of Xenoblade 2, so who knows what Xenoblade 3 is going to do for us. But it's, we're very excited. It was a big reveal, and, I mean, you can check out our reactions. We did reaction videos, one for me and one for Kai and Sam, and essentially we freak out a little bit. Kai freaks out a bit more in Mario Strikers, but you know what? I said we can't do a discussion video on that, so sorry, Kai.
Fair. Honestly fair.
But yes, we are here now to just give our reactions to that trailer, because our sort of afterthoughts, because it's a bit too much for us to discuss in the main podcast. It would be a very long podcast, so Xenoblade deserves its own discussion video. This isn't really an analysis or breakdown. Kai actually did that on his stream, so you might find the VOD still up of that. But it's more so just giving our general thoughts on it, what we liked, what we want to see more of when the game eventually comes out. And I say eventually, in like 7 months, so damn.
Yeah,
But
that's one of the craziest parts is that release date. The fact that it's so early. I mean, clearly they've been working on it for a while.
yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of rumours these past the past year or so. Of course, there's the whole thing with Jenna Coleman's voice actress and all that. And who knew it actually turned out it's probably all true from that. So yeah, there we go.
Very possibly, yeah.
But yeah, that's what we're just going to get started on this. We'll sort of break it down, so there will be timestamps in the description below if you want to hop about between the different sections. And do keep in mind, you probably knew this already, but there will be spoilers for Xenoblade 1 and 2 being discussed here, because evidently it's all going to be connected. But let's just get straight started, I think. The story. Let's just crack on with the general concept of the game, and that is that we are merging the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2, or the future of these worlds, whatever that means. What do you think of this concept, that they're outright combining both worlds, Kai?
Well, when people talk about Xenoblade 3, I feel like that is the most said thing that was going to happen, that people predicted, is it's going to combine the two worlds, or it's going to be a combination of the game somehow. And people are like, yeah, Shulk and Rex are going to meet, and that's going to be the plot of the third game.
Yeah.
So the fact that the worlds have combined, that concept on its own isn't overly crazy. The crazy part is kind of the execution of it, because in this world we haven't seen Shulk or Rex. We've seen very little semblance of old characters, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But
Definitely.
It's really cool how they've actually made it happen now. And one thing I was worried about is that this game isn't going to be seen as its own individual game. You know, it's just going to be an extension of 1 and 2. But it does look like they've got an all-new cast and all-new story. So I'm actually quite optimistic about it having its own story in its own, while also adding elements from Xenoblade 1 and 2 to become its own, like, really good game. So I'm really excited for the worlds merging to be a strong part of the story, but not being overly overwhelming, I hope.
I completely agree, because, of course, one of the great things about Xenoblade 2 was sort of playing this new world and then experiencing this new world, but later on discovering how it connects to Xenoblade 1, and how you discover that is really a great part of the experience. But the whole thing is, you kind of, when we were discussing before, you know, how do we do Xenoblade 3, that you kind of think, well, they can't really pull it off again, can they? Have an entirely new world and then last minute, surprise, Klaus caused this world to happen again. You know, they couldn't do the exact same trick, but at the same time, if it was just a straight up merge of, you know, the Avengers of Xenoblade, here's Shulk and here's Rex meeting together to fight a combined enemy, it seems a bit too obvious and a bit too simple for Xenoblade standards. So I think they really have found, at least conceptually, the perfect balance of, like you said, an entirely new world, but we know that there are elements of the other worlds, and they're just being opaque about it this time. Yes, this is a sequel to 1 and 2, but to what extent? We don't know yet, and to be honest with you, I don't want to know until I play the game. I want that to be a cool part of the story, is discovering how it connects to 1 and 2, and how this new world is connected to the worlds of both games, or the new worlds created at the ends of both games potentially. I want that to be part of the experience. That, of course, like Xenoblade 2, if you're a long-time fan, you're going to be freaking out. If you're not, you might be a bit confused, but you'll be able to run with it, and just enjoy the story for what it is. So, I do agree that's sort of the perfect way of doing it.
Yeah, because I mean, like you said there, like I feel like a lot of fans of the series would have found it a little too predictable that, oh, at the end it's all connected again, because we already had that with Xenoblade 2, they're not going to fool us twice with that. So I'm glad they came up front with that. The question we have is, how does this work? Because in terms of the finer details of the story, there are already some inconsistencies with what we already know. So it's about figuring out what is going on.
Exactly. It's how do you combine the elements of these two worlds, because these are their own worlds with not just different characters and different settings, but different rules to existence. The blade system, how does that function? Because we do see evidence of flesh eaters and potentially normal blades as well, but not too much evidence. And of course, we've got different species from both worlds. But yeah, it's like, in what capacity do these two connect and fit with each other? And how does life go about in this new world? Because Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2, of course, both go deep into the origins of their own world and sort of the laws of nature, I suppose, for each one by the end of the game. We don't know exactly how that's translated to 3, so it's going to be very fascinating to find out. And but again, like I said, I don't want them to give too much away beforehand, because I want to just have my mind blown as I'm playing this game. I'm sure, in hindsight, once the game's done, I'm sure we'll be having many discussions on all of the lore and stuff and whatever crazy shit's revealed. But
absolutely,
it's definitely intriguing at the moment. And I guess to stick with the sort of story elements, what do you think of this whole idea of these two nations? We've got Keves, which seems to be sort of machine-based and has a lot of connections with the Xenoblade 1 world. And then we have, I believe, Agnes as the other nation, which is ether-focused and seems to have a lot to do with the Xenoblade 2 world. What do you think about this sort of almost segmenting of the two nations?
Well, at first sight, there are two clear ways to distinguish these, two parallels you can draw. The first is the relationship between Keves and Agnes being sort of the Bionis and Mechonis. One is the light side, the one that's got ether and all of that, Agnes and Bionis, and then the other side is all focused on mechanical stuff, Keves and Mechonis. And then, the other comparison, the big one, like you've been saying, is Keves representing Xenoblade 1 with, things representing Mechon and, similar machinery, and then Agnes representing Xenoblade 2's world with the ether. There's two huge parallels to draw there, but they're not... And to be honest, I'd be a little worried if the story was that straightforward. It's just, two sides are fighting. But it's Monolith Soft, and we know that they're going to go deeper than that. We know that there's going to be some really good reason as to why this is the case, and there's going to be a more fleshed out story for it. So I'm kind of cool with it. Again, the concept at first is pretty plain, but we know as a result, Monolith Soft's going to make it great. So, no worries.
Yeah. I think straight away one of the big differences we're seeing between Xenoblade 1, because obviously it draws the most similarities to Xenoblade 1, as you mentioned. But in that game, you play as the characters from Bionis, and they're the protagonists. Mechonis is the enemy. And you do later discover that there's reasons to why the people of Mechonis, or at least Egil, does what he does. But still, you're not really playing from their perspective. But in this game, we seem to be half and half on the party members, 3 from each. And we'll get more to the specifics of those party members later, but straight away that sets the interesting premise that we are not having a bias. We're not having these are the good guys and these are the bad guys. There's no clear-cut way of looking at it this time, which I think makes it a very interesting mix-up, and I think seeing these characters from these different nations interact and their different mindsets is probably going to create a lot of interesting story moments.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, is that there is no good and bad side. They are just two different sides. If it is the idea that one's a Xenoblade 1 world and one's a Xenoblade 2 world, then it is very much two sides that we're familiar with.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to see how that plays out. They're likely, considering that all 6 of these party members from both sides end up teaming up, there's clearly, not that strong of an opposition with, regular people. So I'm curious to see how exactly the dynamic plays out between the two nations.
Definitely, and I think maybe this is just a perfect time to transition a bit into the characters themselves. So, of course, the characters we have that we know of, at least the main playable characters, on the Keves side, the machine side, we have, let me see if I remember this because I haven't noted it down. We have Noah, the protagonist, or one of the two protagonists. We have his childhood friends, Lance, and Uni, who seems to be Hyentia, or at least partly Hyentia.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the other side we have Agnes. Agnes. Hey, is that right?
Yep, Agnes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the nation, yeah.
I got it. It's not Angus, no, that's like related to cows. Here we go. So yeah, Agnes. And we have the protagonist Mio, who appears to be Gormoti, as well as her friends Senna, who looks like a blade potentially, and Taeon, who uses like origami. And
Akos
just
2.0.
Akos 2.0, which I get comparisons to myself with Akos, so I'm sure that's going to relate onto this one. But it's you have glasses and dark hair, it just happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, straight off the bat, love these character designs. What are you thinking, Kai?
I really like them, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I know at the beginning of Xenoblade 2, people were a bit like, eh. Well, I'll say that. There were mixed reviews when Xenoblade 2's character designs first released.
I feel like Rex, even, he's how salvager gear. It gets used to it and you sort of like it by the end of the game, but it's a tough sell at the start because it looks odd, I think. But
yeah, I think I'm talking like mainly from an outsider's perspective for anyone who hasn't played the games yet. Rex and Pyra's designs are questionable from that point of view, which I understand. But I think they've done a great job here. I think all of them look really good. They all seem to fit. I think Noah's drip is great. He's absolutely dripping. 100%. I think all of them, to be fair, just like they look just really good. I like the outfits. I like all their facial designs. They seem to really have drawn from. I mean, clearly it's Xenoblade 2's artists back at it again, but they seem to have drawn a little closer to Xenoblade 1, like very slightly in my eyes. Like still mainly a Xenoblade 2 centered design, but I feel like they've gone a little further away from generic anime, so I do kind of like that.
It's a bit more Xenoblade Definitive Edition style, I suppose. I guess it's the closest we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, and I think actually saying Definitive Edition reminds me, like I feel like they've now sort of established this as a very Xenoblade defined style. This is very noticeable to me and recognizable as a Xenoblade thing. Maybe it's just because I'm looking at things like the weapons and the art style, but I do really like them. I think Taeon looks like a Pokemon Go character, and I think that's great. I think that's great. Overall, really good drip.
It's interesting as well, like they're very close towards Xenoblade 1. We've now got an all-adult cast. We've actually had confirmed their ages as all 18+, which is interesting because that was, I believe, the same in Xenoblade 1, wasn't it? Everyone was 18 or over. So
yeah, they were.
So the fact that they veered away from these sort of more, characters like Rex and Nia, who outlive it, Tora even, and Poppy, it's kind of an interesting difference, but I'm on board with it. I think, especially in this sort of the story that seems to be going for of a big war between two nations, it makes sense to have more an adult cast. But
I mean, even then, we still have Cena there who looks a bit more childlike, so I'm sure if they do want any comedy relief scenes or anything with anyone who is childlike, then that's always there as an option.
Yes, we have sort of got a bit of they've been posting on the Twitter, the Japanese Twitter, but also on Nintendo of Europe Twitter, about little descriptions of these characters. There's bits on the website as well. So we have started to get a bit of an idea for what they're like. So like Senna is apparently all about muscle training. Do you even lift, bro? That's Senna in a nutshell, it seems.
Yeah.
We've got characters like Uni, who appears to be sort of, and you can sort of tell from the trailer, she seems a bit more confrontational perhaps, but it definitely, we still have yet to see exactly the dynamics of these characters. We know that, for example, the Kevis side are childhood friends, but we've yet to really see how that's going to play out in dynamic in the story. But already I'm glad that we have this seemingly variety of different styles of characters and personality types. You know, it's very important to this kind of game to have people who are going to clash with each other and hit different story points from different character perspectives, but it's definitely an interesting setup so far. And one thing I particularly want to mention, now we're talking about the characters, is Mio is a flesh eater. I think now's as any good a time to bring that up. What is that about?
There are a lot
Because
of questions, aren't there?
it's very clear the connections to Nia there. Now, we might potentially see Nia later in the trailer, because it's also worth mentioning we see two characters at the end who seem to be the rulers of each nation. One being Melia, looking a lookalike, and one being a Nia lookalike, at the very least. What does this mean? What connection does Mio have to Nia? It's... We could sit here theorising for ages, I think, but do you have any specific thoughts on that you want to say, Kai?
I think that, maybe they are relatives. One, crackpot theory I have, which I don't think's gonna happen, and it's completely unfounded, but I have the feeling that the game might run along themes of, reincarnation or revival. So I feel like maybe, that's related.
It did say that the game has a theme of life, I believe it mentioned, so...
Yeah,
that could definitely fit with...
it.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe Mio is a relative of Nia's, maybe a I don't know, a sibling perhaps, or just I don't know, some kind of relative relationship going on there maybe. We're not sure exactly what yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's the case. Even if the masked person isn't Nia, I still think Mio is related to them, because it kind of makes sense to have one of the main characters be related to one of the higher ups like that. The game generally likes to have a character be in that position, so having a main character like Mio there, I think does work.
Yeah, and you kind of wonder what is the role of a flesh eater in this world, or even a blade, because we mentioned before Senna seems to be a blade, and they've listed both of their ages as 18 and 19, which is, I mean, you could just say they've been awakened for that amount of time, but that seems odd to specify. So,
yeah.
I'm not sure if blades even have the same rules that they did. They might live more like normal humans. But in that case, why do we still have the difference between a clear crystal and a flesh eater crystal? Why is that difference still there if blades live more like humans? There's a lot to wonder about here. And I understand that this is going to be most of us just being confused, because we have no answers. There are no answers, and...
Yeah.
It makes it interesting, though.
There's a lot of questions. Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many questions about just the context of the game, because, it's not like this is all from scratch. They are drawing heavily from the other games, and so, we see that there's flesh eaters and possibly blades and the like here. So it's just the question of where they fit into things overall, and we have no idea at all.
And again, that's something I don't want them to confirm beforehand. I want to discover that and... Yeah. Let that sort of reveal itself in more subtle ways, that if you've played it, you'll know. And if you haven't, it'll just pass over your head as neat. Mm-hmm. I think that's maybe a good time to... I sort of mentioned them briefly, but those two figures we see at the end, the rulers, who not just based on their voices you hear in the trailer, very much sound like the voice actresses for the two characters. The designs are very clearly reminiscent. They want you, at the very least, they want you to think this is Nia and Melia. And I think they most likely are. Of course, this would make sense, them being in charge, because they live longer. If this is set in the future and time has passed, these two would still be not just alive, but of a young, healthy age. Do you think we're looking at a future set here? Do you think this is a world set 100 years after the two worlds have combined, potentially? Or
I think it's very, very possible. Incredibly possible. And what you say with the ages makes sense. Let's say the game takes place 100 years after these worlds have combined in the events of the other two games. A lot of the main characters, it gives enough time that a lot of the main characters won't be there because they've died of age or whatever. So, you won't be seeing the likes of Rex or Shulk. However, it would make sense for Melia and Nia to still be there, because Melia at this point would just be middle-aged. And Nia as a flesh eater would also be something along those lines, so it makes sense that they would live. And then it also, that sort of 100-year or so span gives enough time that conflict can happen within that time that you slowly learn about throughout the game. Because if we
Yeah.
were, getting thrown into things as soon as the two worlds merged, then nothing would be established. There's no
Exactly. Right.
history to the game, so I feel like almost certainly it's got to take place a decent length of time after the worlds have merged. So yeah, I think roughly 100 years, give or take, is around it.
Yeah, I completely agree that, we've got to be like at least 30 or 50 years for these nations to have established, but from the way they seem very much established and seem to have their own rule sets, we've got to be looking at even longer. So I do agree that that's good logic there. 100, about 100 years or something would make sense. That does raise the question, of course, is would you want to see other blades in this? Because they, hypothetically, could still be around, even if they had different drivers, or in Pyromithra's case, they might not even need another driver, they can live on without one. Although we don't know the rules of what happens when they came back separately after the end of Xenoblade 2, we have no idea if they come back and they're more human-like. Do you want to see other blades from Xenoblade 2 pop up in this?
I'm honestly not sure. I'm really not sure, and I think it entirely depends on how they would plan on approaching it. Because as we see, Xeno might be a blade and that sort of thing. Some people actually say she resembles Bridget with the hair, so that's a possibility.
I can see it, yeah.
So I guess that it's just about how they do it. Maybe the blades in this world are detached from humans, and they are the themselves that just are basically humans at this point. Maybe they're not around at all. If so, what happens to them? All these questions would have to add into the world building of the game, and how does the atmosphere compare to them? So I would be okay with it, but only if they do it well, only if they tell it properly, which I'm sure they will.
I think in general I'd like to see some of these characters appear, but perhaps later, and in if we see, for example, say it's 60 years later and we see an old man Rex in there, I think that could be done well, but I'd like it to be treated in a way that doesn't take the focus away from the main cast. I think it's the most important thing. So I think what we need, if we're going to do this, what we need to do is first really establish these current characters and make us fall in love with them and their stories. So that way, when a later character shows up, it doesn't overshadow it. It's kind of a risk thing, but I mean, I'm going to make a reference you won't understand, Kai, but Star Wars did this whole thing where people were worried that if they introduced Boba Fett into The Mandalorian, he would overshadow the new character. But by the time they introduced him in Season 2, everyone loved The Mandalorian so much that they would be rooting for him rather than Boba Fett at that point. So that's a Star Wars analogy for any Star Wars fans out there. I'm sorry for confusing you, Kai. But
no, it's fair.
Something along those lines where we introduce like Rex or maybe Pyra later in the game, at a point when they don't take over the story, they don't become part of your party or part of your main crew, but rather Rex is an old man you go to seek for wisdom or something, which is a weird thought to say that out loud. But
old man Rex.
I'm just imagining it now. It's still in the salvage gear, of course, because
roll 85 of the salvage's cord.
Oh god, you know what? I would absolutely love if they did that joke. I'm not gonna lie. I want that now so much.
But if you scrape your knee or get a scare, put me in my wheelchair. I can't remember what number of the salvage's cord that is.
That was scarily quick how much you came up with that, guy. But before we keep on the salvage code, one character that we haven't mentioned, and is probably the most direct relation that we have, is Vandom, or a Vandom, because we don't just hear his voice, we see him, and without a mask, and he looks nearly exactly like Vandom from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. He's got the same voice, he's got the same scar, or at least a similar scar. He doesn't appear to have, like, Orion facial features and stuff, which is interesting because, of course, Gomotti still have Gomotti features, so is this the same Vandom? Is this a descendant? Is this just this game's version of Vandom? Because I know that's a Xenoblade recurring thing. If that's the case, I think it's a bit confusing to have the same voice actor as 2, so there's got to be a bit more to it, I reckon, but I don't know.
It's a question, isn't it?
Yeah. Like I said, I don't think it is just this game's Vandom and it happens to look and sound like him, because they would know that's too confusing. If they wanted it to be the running joke of Vandom, they would change his design, I think. But yeah, whatever this means, this would fit with your idea of reincarnation, of course, or potentially something along those lines.
This was what fueled it a lot, because I mean, I don't think it's the exact same Van Damme, because even though it could just be the shading, you know, I think that's a very different skin color to what Van Damme has. I don't think, you know, and he's got the beard as well. I don't think they're going to change that.
No.
So I don't think it's exactly Van Damme. I think it could perhaps be a relative. Or, you know, again, if it feeds into my reincarnation / revival theory, then maybe there's something along those lines. I do think that this is just, in a way, like the Van Damme of this game. However, like you say, I think there is more to it on top of that. Like, he is the signature Van Damme of the game, but there's going to be more to his story on top of that. Like Van Damme from Xenoblade 2, you know, actually being part of the story. So it definitely seems to be something along those lines. I know there's speculation about maybe he acts as like a middle ground in the game. Perhaps he has a third faction that isn't part of Agnes or Kevis. I'm curious to see if that's the case.
That would be cool, yeah.
We'll be keeping our eyes peeled to see if there's any more that sort of releases with this guy, because he is instrumental to understanding what the hell is going on in this world.
Yeah, and how it's connected to the past games. That will definitely be a telling tale there. And of course, we're nearly done with the characters, but we can't not mention we have Nopon back. We have Nopon here. So, of course, it's Xenoblade, it's got to have Nopon. What do you think, or what do you want the function of Nopon to be in this world? Because, you know, they've sort of taken different approaches in different games. Xenoblade 1, they're sort of the natives of Magna Forest. Xenoblade 2, they're all merchants, and not that Xenoblade 1 didn't have silliness, but they sort of upped it in Xenoblade 2 with Nopons being slightly creepy, and it was funny. Like, I did enjoy the humour with the Nopon, but what would you want them to be in 3? What kind of function would you want them to take?
Honestly, I'm not sure. Like, in a way, I would really like them to be sort of a peace factor between the two, if that makes sense. Like, you know, Nopon appear from both worlds. And it would be really funny if that was the thing that made the two nations understand each other, is, hey, we both have Nopon that communicate with each other in exactly the same way. What's going on here? And they start to figure things out from there. So they'll definitely, you know, be part of the game. These two Nopon that we see in particular, the blue and the orange one, I have a feeling that they are going to be like, I don't know, I feel like they might be recurring comic relief where, let's say the group is exploring for a region, these guys might just like randomly be showing up elsewhere in the region. It will just cut to them, and they'll just have like a funny dialogue conversation while 1 or 2 bits of useful information is dropped in the background.
I can see that.
I get that feeling. I also feel like this one in blue, I don't think he'll join the party as a playable character. You know, there might be more than the original 6, so he could join. But I mean, probably not. But I'm saying it's a possibility, because you see that Nopon has an outfit and it has a weapon behind its back, just like Tora would, or Ricky would, I suppose.
You could even maybe... You could make you fight him. I mean, you don't tend to fight Nopon very much in games outside of like the odd one side quest where you fight one or something. But it would be cool to see that. I mean, it's interesting that these two Nopon we see one is clearly based on their outfits. One is clearly associated with Keves, and one is associated with Agnes. So we do see both sides. But I do like the idea of the Nopon having their own sort of civilization and being sort of the middle ground. Maybe the middle ground is just Van Damme and a bunch of Nopon. You know, that's it. He's just chilling with them all.
Oh, I'd love that. There you go.
The dynamic there would be hilarious. But I'm looking forward to seeing Royal Nopon serve in this game. And of course, if there'll be a party member. Because usually there is one, but you know, X didn't have one, so...
Yeah, no, we did Torna.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. But in general, I think it just shows, you know... There's so many questions with the characters, but... Like you said with the story, it's good that we have all these questions about these potential connected characters, but we're also very much intrigued by the new ones. And the fact that they've got these designs nailed straight out of the bat is a good sign for, you know, not relying too much on the past games, but letting these new characters show off what they're made of.
Exactly.
But to talk a little bit more about the world, a little bit of what we see. I mean, as always, it's a Xenoblade world. It looks beautiful. But it's just fascinating how we're seeing. The most intriguing part is certain aspects of both, like, direct locations ripped from both worlds. So not only do we see the Orion Titan, we see the Mechonis Sword. We see straight up the Fallen Arm and the exact same landmark of the Distant Fingertip from Xenoblade 1.
Yep.
What do you think, to what extent do you think we're going to see familiar locations? Because outside of the Fallen Arm landmark, most of the explorable areas seem unique still, even if they're familiar. But do you think we'll see any more places that are just not ripped from Xenoblade Chronicles, but are altered versions of places from both games?
Yeah, well, I mean, in our discussion we spent like a lot of time looking for every frame of these different scenes, because they gave us, like, I think in the end it was something like maybe 20 different scenes of, like, you know, different environments.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And yeah, I think just looking over them all, it seems like there are going to be around maybe, like, I'd say 25% or so of the regions, 1/4, or maybe even a little bit more, will be like remixed versions of what we know. So for example, one of them is we can see an area that combines, it's like a desert version of the Fallen Arm, a wastelandish version, that combines directly into a new grassland, where you can also see Uriah crashing into the land in the background. So it seems like they've kind of mixed all of it together, given it a fresh coat of paint, because, you know, Fallen Arm wasn't a wasteland before. And I feel like that's going to be the premise for some of the areas. I think another place where we see this is, I'm speculating that there will be a sort of an area that is a mix of Leferia and like a sunken version of the Bionis head with RFC.
Is that the place where we see them, like, on the boat?
Yeah, you can kind of see it in the background with the boat. You see Leferia and then what looks like the crown of the Bionis.
Right.
And then in a couple of other scenes, if you match it up, it looks like there's elements of both Leferia and RFC chilling. So, you know, some of the areas like that I do think will be mixed with the both the worlds and remixed. However, I do think there will also be areas that are completely unique. For example, some kind of a land with floating rocks. You know, it could be related to more Ardain, but I speculate that it might just be its own thing. Possibly a new jungle area that's reminiscent of Machna Forest, but again, not the same. A new version of Gower Plains, essentially. I feel like they're going to do a completely new thing for that.
Oh, completely.
So, you know, it seems like there'll be a good mix of remixed areas that combine both games together, and then also some new areas. I suppose one of the new areas that intrigues me most, real quick, is it's a place where the fight is taking place in the trailer. It's kind of got like the reddish ground, and I think that is almost certainly a new area, and that really interests me because it just looks cool.
I definitely agree that we're probably going to get a bit of a mixture, and if we do see, it'll be interesting to see how many places are direct, like, exact sames, because we see the Distant Fingertip looks exactly the same, but of course when you go down to the base of it, like you said, the whole palm of the Fallen Arm is a wasteland, it's a desert, so that's not the same. So we might see some specific small landmarks that are identical, but the rest of them, I've seen a lot of theories that Uriah might be covered in snow based on what we're looking at it from, which will completely change up the environment and the way you play it, so it'll be interesting to see how they balance that. Are there any specific places or locations you want to see transformed into this new world? Like, for example, do you want to go on Galahad Fortress now vertical because the sword is stuck down? Like, that would be crazy, but, you know, is there any sort of places like that you want to see remixed in here?
Well, if you were to ask me that without me having seen the trailer, I would have instantly said the Fallen Arm, so I'm glad that that's returning off the bat. Just because that's one of my favourite areas. Outside of that, I'm honestly not sure, apart from what they've already shown. You know, it looks like we may have places like Gormott and Gower Plains there already. I'm really not sure at all. Like, it's so much of a variable. You know, maybe I guess I would like to see the new Colony 9 again, because you know, the one that got remade at the end of Xenoblade 1. It might not even be there still. I doubt it, honestly, but it'll be cool if that was there and we could kind of explore that, I suppose. Yeah,
we only see one. I mean, we see a few different areas that could have civilization, but we only see one real town, which seems to... People have said it looks a bit like Alba Cavendish. It's the most sort of similarity you can find, but in general it looks quite unique. So it will be interesting what towns we see. Are they going to be new towns, or are we going to see... Is Colony 9 going to be here, or does that no longer exist? Is it just entirely new civilization set up on these old ruins? It'll be interesting to see how they balance that out. But I think one thing, we've talked all about the different things we see in the trailer and how we think about those and what we want to see more of, but let's talk about something we saw zero of in the trailer, but it's going to be, of course, a huge deal, and that's gameplay, because outside of a bit of exploring, we see stuff like, we see you able to ride a boat around, that looks fun. That's definitely a classic JRPG trope, but Xenoblade never did it. But when it comes to the combat, how is it going to play, and how do you want it to play? What are your thoughts, Kai, here?
Now, this is something we did very little speculation on because they showed us nothing. The only real thing with the gameplay we know, or at least we can almost infer, is that it looks like 4 party members in battle will be returning.
Right, from Xenoblade X, yeah.
Yeah, because you see it happen in a couple of the scenes. There's almost always 4 people out exploring, which I'm cool with, I guess. I don't really know how much it'll shake things up, but I'm chill with it. I am not sure. I think that what they'll probably do is gather some things from the other games and bring them back, break, topple. I think that will return.
100%, yeah.
The question is, are they going to go the route of days or launch and smash?
Or something new.
Yeah, or something new, exactly. And then, it's outside of that, what else do they bring in? Will chain attacks return? I think yes, but maybe in a new way. They're going to make it new like they did for Xenoblade 2.
Yeah,
same thing goes for like a key new mechanic in battle. I don't know if we'll have blade combos return or anything like that.
Well,
I think we'll get some new big mechanic.
The interesting part is, I think it's easier to relate it to Xenoblade 1's combat than 2's, because 2's revolved so heavily around the blade system and the elements of your blades and that. And that, I think it's a safe bet to say, blades do not function as they did in Xenoblade 2 here. That they would just be, that we're getting just individual party members. I don't think we're going to have a gacha system or, a big variety of the kinds of blades you can use like we did in 2. I think it's going to play more to 1 in the sense of you've got these set characters. But, at the same time, that doesn't mean they couldn't use elements of Xenoblade 2's combat. They could bring back elements. We haven't really seen any evidence of that. I don't think characters seem to clearly resemble a specific element. So I doubt we'll see that, but could we see orbs in some function? Possibly. Ultimately, I think what we're going to see is, much like they did for Xenoblade 2, it's going to be completely different. We'll like you said, we'll have break and topple, they'll be using arts, but other than that, the way that we fight will be unique. I guess the main question you have is, would you rather it be selecting arts from like a little menu or a scrolling thing like in Xenoblade 1, or would you prefer things to be assigned to just quick button presses like in 2?
I'm not sure. I'm honestly, I like both gameplay types for their own reasons.
Same.
I don't really have much of a... I think that 2's is far more complex, which comes with both advantages and disadvantages.
That's true, yeah.
Although I believe I'm in the minority who believes that Xenoblade 2's combat is like far more complex. I'm not sure on that one.
I would agree with you, but I haven't looked into it too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like this game could go either way. It really could go either way. Maybe it won't even have like arts as we know them. It might be something completely new. It's really tough to tell at this point.
Yeah. It'll definitely be interesting to see the balance that they get on how much actiony it is. I mean, we're not going to get a full like Final Fantasy VII Remake action RPG, or anything like that. But to what extent, do you have... Even the smaller details, like, do you have to stop to attack like you did in 2, or can you just keep moving like you did in 1? The way that they sort of mix and mash bits from both, or do completely new stuff, I'm really interested to see that.
Maybe there's no fighting at all, it's just a dating sim. There you go. It's a visual novel, there you go.
It's a visual novel now, yeah. So you don't... All the times we see them running, you don't actually play any of that, you just have to say, I choose to go to this place, and then you just watch them. It's like a loading screen.
Yeah, oh, that sounds brilliant.
Oh, man. Yeah, I think you solved it, Kai.
There you go.
They haven't revealed the subtitle, but it's going to be called Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Pick your waifu and husbanda. That's it.
God.
That's just the name of it.
Lovely.
Oh.
Well,
Xenoblade, eh?
Hey.
Now that's pretty much, we've pretty much covered all the moments here. I think that's the main thing I want to see more of is the gameplay. That's the only thing we don't know, and that's the thing. Like, I don't need to know more about these characters and the world before I go into the game. I'm sold.
Yeah.
And of course, even if the gameplay looks naff, I'm still going to buy it. But I want to see the gameplay. That's the main thing that's holding out that we need to see. But other than that, I'm just very much hyped about this. I can't wait to just be able to play it soon. Any other final thoughts, Kai? Any sort of things you want to mention?
I think the only big thing is in terms of consistency, I have one big question.
Oh, yeah?
This is possibly even bigger than the Van Damme thing. Why is the Mechonis sword a whole sword again? Because we know that in Xenoblade 1 it broke. Like it got completely shattered. Why is it here again? But that's something we'll figure out when the game comes out, I'm sure. And I'm looking forward to them giving us more information over time. You know, not like the huge stuff that we're going to be learning in the game, but just sort of very brief backgrounds on certain things. I'm liking, you know, what they're doing with that so far, giving us droplets of information, because we are thirsty for content before the game comes out.
I mean, Kai, I already have the answer to your Mechonis sword question. A lot of tape. I mean a lot. No, they cleaned out all of the stores, all of the Walmarts, all of the Tesco's from around the world, whatever. Yeah, a lot of tape.
God, knock-on flex tape.
Yes. Oh, made from the sap of Magna trees or something. Sure, yeah. And yeah, I guess the other thing I will quickly mention is we know that a lot of the people who did the soundtracks of the previous games are returning, so that's going to be straight up fire. We know that's going to be the case.
It's going to be brilliant.
Including the flutes. We didn't even mention the flutes and the fact that they're off-seers and what that means. Because, to be honest, we don't really know what that means, but
yeah,
it's going to be interesting to find out. And yeah, the soundtrack is going to be in my head rent-free, I can confirm already. But that is pretty much it. So thank you so much for watching and listening to our ramblings of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I'm sure we'll be talking about this game pretty much for the rest of this podcast existence, I'm sure. But as we always bring up Xenoblade 1 and 2 in pretty much every podcast we do. But yeah, it's going to be fun. So do look forward to the rest of our coverage on that. Of course, you can find it here on YouTube, BunchaJokahs, as well as podcasting sites. We have audio-only versions of the discussions like this. All under the name BunchaJokahs, very easy to find. We have our monthly podcast coming up where we will talk about the rest of the direct news, because it wasn't just Xenoblade 3. There's a whole lot more to talk about. And of course we'll have extra videos coming out along the next few months as well. Next month, 5 years of the Switch. We're going to be talking about that because that's bloody crazy. But yeah. Please, so stay tuned. Please check out all of check us out on all those places. And a big thank you to you, Kai, for joining me once again. Where can people find you at?
Yeah, they can find me at twitch.tv/Fascurreyn. So, as we mentioned earlier, one of the things we did was we all sort of went through together on a recent stream, speculating everything in the trailer we possibly could. We went through every screenshot of every different scene and speculated for like 4 hours straight on not only this but the whole direct. So if you want kind of our in-depth thoughts, you know, of a discussion with us two and a couple of others, then feel free to go there, and you know, we really have sort of summed up everything we possibly can so far.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
And of course, a big thank you to our graphic designer, Sam. He's not with us for this video. We were able to get rid of him for the first time in a few months, thank goodness. But we still have to appreciate him for creating the thumbnail and logos, and we'll have a link to his Twitter in the description below, so thank you, Sam. And until then, we'll just see you guys in the next video. Take care, and hype for Xenoblade. Goodbye.
Bye.